Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Annie, this is Stanley, and we're here to talk about books. In today's video, we're going to be talking about all the books that I finished in July. And what a month it has been. So I started Herkyard 2.0, the hardest reading challenge you'll ever do, which I'll put a link to in the description if you want to join in. It's not too late to start. I think it officially started on the 7th of July. So I started a bit early because I went on retreat at the end of June and didn't want to miss the opportunity to read lots of books and tick off all the prompts. And then my robot TBR prompt jar betrayed me and put Les Misérables by Victor Hugo on my TBR for the month. So I had to start the year-long, ridiculously complicated, many books and prompts challenge with the longest book I have ever read in my life. So that was interesting. And then I went on retreat and read 12 books in a week, which I have an excellent, if I do say so myself, video all about on the channel, and came back and didn't want to read for several days. Had a bit of a reading slump coming back from retreat. And then I ended up reading 4 books at once because I was chipping away at Les Mis and I was listening to an audiobook. And I was reading a book for my Reviews Revisited series, and I was also reading another physical book when I didn't want to be reading Les Mis. So it has been quite a month, let us say. So let's get into the reviews. But no, first of all, see, my brain is all over the place. First of all, before we get to the reviews, let's make some tea. What's this? New tea? Yes, I went to the Fantasy Forest Festival in Cheltenham not so long ago and met the lovely purveyors of Lucky Leaf Teas. And I got Palatial Promenade, which is white and green tea with lavender and rose, and Ranger's Refreshment, which is green tea and cucumber. I have tried them both and they are excellent, really excellent tea. So definitely be looking forward to getting more tea from them. It was an amazing time I had at the festival, and here are some pictures. Back to the tea for today, because I don't actually have room in the tea drawers for my new tea, so I have to drink lots of tea to empty some drawers. So what do we got? 7 and 11 is 18, so 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. That is green berry and vanilla. Lovely. Oh, can't get it out. There we go. So it's going to take a few pots for me to empty this drawer, so it's not necessarily going to help me get a new tea into the tea drawers, but there we are. We'll get there eventually. It can live in the cupboard for a bit, and Dave will be cross when he opens the cupboard and sees that there's tea that doesn't fit in the drawers, but hey. He's lived with me for 20 years. He should know by now that there's pretty much always going to be tea in the cupboard that doesn't fit in the drawers. Good old Past Me has, as ever, already filled the kettle and boiled it. And we're back with the good old purple teapot, which gives you a decent few cups of tea. Green berry and vanilla. Today's tea choice. Okay, so now we've got our tea. Now we can get into the reviews. So, first book I read, I Know It's You by Susan Lewis. This went on to the TBR to fulfill the July prompt from the Adventures in Eldia aspect of the Magical Readathon Challenge, where I am travelling along a map and I get a prompt every month, depending on where I go. And this was a 5-star prediction. This did not end up being a 5-star book, unfortunately. I predicted it as 5 stars. It's a bit of a challenge for me because I don't very often have 5-star books, and when I do, they're usually a complete surprise. So I picked this because I really enjoyed Losing You by Susan Lewis earlier in the year, and I thought I would enjoy more of hers. And I mean, yes, I did enjoy it. It's about a publisher, an editor at a publisher called Marina, who starts getting sent sections of a book, and she very quickly realizes that they're thinly veiled references to things that have happened to her in the past. And she rapidly spirals into despair and paranoia about what's going on and why someone is writing this book. The biggest problem I had was that the book within the book, because we do get to read most of the manuscript as it gets sent to her, isn't really very good. And Marina does point this out in a really blatant example of lampshading by Susan Lewis, which is fair enough that she's pointing out that it's not very good, but that doesn't explain why the agent who got sent the manuscript in the first place thought that it would be a great book to publish and wanted to send it to her. So that didn't quite follow. And also it means that I, as a reader, had to wade through all of this turgid prose and ridiculous melodrama in this book within the book. Losing You, the other book that I read by Susan Lewis, was very sharply observed, very emotionally resonant, really affecting, and stayed with me a long time. This is just straight up melodrama. And there are, good things about that. It was very compelling. I shouted at the book a lot while I was reading it because people kept doing stupid things and ridiculous stuff kept happening. So it did keep me gripped. The police procedural aspect is absolute nonsense. I mean, there's no way the police in real life would act the way they do in this book. And the ending was, unfortunately, quite disappointing, which was a shame because it could have ramped up and really landed the ending, and it didn't. So 3 stars from me for I Know It's You by Susan Lewis. It is also, though, fulfilling the red cover for Herkyard and something else which I've forgotten. This is the problem with having so many reading challenges. I forget what prompts the books are fulfilling, so I will stick that up here somewhere to let you know, but it was definitely the red cover and something else. Next, I went on to Tipping the Velvet, which I picked because the 2 prompts that I pulled out of my Herkyard prompt TBR jar were the pink cover and the adaptations. And this, whilst it's meant to be 50% at least the cover, the colour, it is pink on the back. But it's also any edition of the book, and there is an edition of this book which has an entirely pink cover. So I'm taking it, and also the TV show adaptation, which is why I wanted to read this book in the first place when I saw it in charity shop, because I love the TV show. The TV show was very impactful for me in terms of my realization of being bisexual, shall we say. And I've watched it many times. I'm making Dave watch it for the podcast in an upcoming episode, our podcast, Will You Still Love It Tomorrow? And so that's going to be fun to revisit. And I enjoyed this. It's very well written. It's compelling. It's got a lot of varied, interesting, layered queer representation. A lot of it is very toxic, but that is deliberate. It's not glorifying or endorsing toxic relationships. It is very much showing them to be a problem and the main character finding her way out of that. It's about Nan, who is an oyster girl in Whitstable I can't remember exactly when it is, late 1800s, very late 1800s, 1890s, I think. And she gets obsessed with a young woman called Kitty Butler, who is a performer. She dresses up in male clothing and sings music hall songs in the music hall, and Nan gets completely obsessed with her, and then the story goes on from there. The biggest problem I have with this is a problem with me and not with the book, because the TV adaptation is so accurate, so faithful to the book, that it was almost a little bit boring reading the book, because I pretty much knew exactly what was going to happen. But it was interesting to see it play out on the page. It was a lot more intense. I didn't like Nan as much as a protagonist after spending nearly 500 pages in her head. She didn't always come across very well, which is quite good because she's complex and layered. She's very flawed. And Kitty, who I also got completely obsessed with watching the TV show, which is why I related to Nan so much, doesn't really kind of come across as a proper character because she's only seen through Nan's eyes because it is first person perspective. So that didn't work quite so well for me. But the unhealthiness of the obsession and the relationship and how it plays out is very much on the page, very intense. And then things progress from there into quite dark places. So yes, I'd give this 4 stars. I didn't enjoy it maybe as much as I had hoped, but yeah, it is a very good book, a good installment in my experience of Sarah Waters. I have read Fingersmith and enjoyed it. I had to DNF The Little Stranger because it was really creepy. But I have enjoyed others of hers, and I've got one more on the shelf that I'm quite looking forward to getting to. So yeah, good book. Right, let's talk about Les Misérables. This has been a roller coaster of an experience, and it's not over yet. I'm not quite done. I don't know whether I will finish it in July, but I'm doing pretty well. So this turned up because the TBR prompt jar. I pulled the prompt of the longest book on my TBR, which this definitely was, and so that got on there. It is admittedly fulfilling the 700 plus page prompt for Herkyed and also the adapted into a musical prompt for Herkyed. So it's quite useful from that point of view, but it is taking up a lot of time. And yeah, I made a deal with my friend Richard, which I'd discuss in my TBR video. If I read some of Les Mis, he would read some of Infinite Jest. I don't know why he decided he was going to do this, but he did, and it was very funny because the prompt came out for Les Misérables almost immediately. So he is reading Infinite Jest while I am reading Les Misérables. And I'm glad that happened because otherwise I might have DNF'd this. First 20 pages or so, incredibly slow, really not very interesting. I was really struggling, massive slog, and I thought, oh god, this is 1,200 pages. And I would say this is very misleading because I looked at this, I thought 1,200 pages. This is 200 pages shorter than the Count of Monte Cristo, which I read last year, which was 1,400 pages, and I got through that fine. So this would be fine too. Misleading. This is actually 40% longer than the Count of Monte Cristo. 655,000 words. It's like 7 other books in one book because the text is so small. It does mean that the book isn't so heavy to carry on the train, but it is tough to read because the text is very small. And it was taking me like 2 minutes a page, and I was really struggling. But I had promised Richard that I would get to at least page 50. So I pushed through, and by page 50, I was massively invested, really enjoying it, very much wanting to carry on. So that was great. It is ridiculously overwritten, ridiculously unnecessarily wordy, but wow, they are good words. Hats off to the translator of this because, I mean, that must have been a lifelong task, I think. But it's very, very well done, very, very beautifully written, quite funny in places, which surprised me. There's lots of philosophy and history and ethics and comments on society, all really fascinating stuff. I'm enjoying it because I know the musical really well, so I'm fascinated to see how that all plays out. I read 500 pages in a week once I got going, which was before, I have to admit, that was in June. It was before I went away on retreat. And it's not cheating for Herkyed, because with Herkyed, you can count a book if you were less than halfway through when you started the Herkyed challenge. So I got 500 pages through, which is less than halfway. So I am using the loophole for that. And then I went on retreat. I didn't take it on retreat because I thought if I take this, that's the only book I'm going to read. And I wanted to read as many books as possible on retreat. When I came back, didn't want to pick it up again because I was like, oh, okay. It's very, very big. But I did. I used several trips out into town and took only Les Mis to read on the train and then got back into it. So I'm reading it in like quite big chunks, but with gaps in between because I decided if I just read this, it's gonna get to me. It's gonna slow me down. I'm gonna get tired of it. So I'm chipping away at it, and I decided I wouldn't force myself to try and finish it in July. So I may not finish it in July. I may finish it in July. I may not. But yeah, comparing it to the musical is really interesting because I thought I couldn't possibly get more annoyed with Marius and Cosette than I do in the musical, but wow, they are much worse in this. There's 100 pages of Marius mooning about being obsessed with Cosette from a distance and not speaking to her. You finally get to a point where you're like, oh, we're going to move on, they're actually going to meet. And it goes back in time to the start of that section and tells it all again from her point of view. So that was a bit of a struggle. But it's very well observed, it's very funny, it's very interesting. So yes, Les Mis. I am actually really enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would, and I am going to finish it, but possibly not this month. Anyway, Richard has been reading Infinite Jest, and he said that he would do a video clip review for my channel. So let's now find out how my friend Richard is getting on with his part of this challenge, reading Infinite Jest. Take it away, Richard.
Hello, I'm Richard, this is Nellie, and this is the infamous Infinite Jest. Well does it deserve that notoriety. It was published in 1996. It's set more or less in the present day, so you do get the fun of seeing which innovations David Foster Wallace, the author, correctly anticipated, and which ones just passed him by. And it's a book about addiction. So addiction to drugs. You get the sense that David Foster Wallace did a lot of drugs, but more pertinently, addiction to media, what nowadays we would call the YouTube algorithm. So in that regard, it's really quite prescient. Now, it's very famous for being long, and there are really no words and no statistics that I can use which will adequately convey the sheer oppressive size of it. It is very fat, the print is very small, and it's very dense. It uses a lot of highfalutin language, it uses a lot of complicated sentence structure, it's just slow going. And the other thing that it's famous for is its digressions. So there are lots of plots, lots of characters all going on simultaneously, and it often goes off on quite random detours. Now sometimes that works really well. So there's one long chapter where all that's happening is a character is waiting for somebody to come to his apartment to deliver some marijuana. But his freewheeling thoughts really work to bring you into his character and to fill in some of the gaps of the imagined world he's living in. The world building is really good there. But a lot of the time the digressions are in the author's voice. They're in David Foster Wallace's structure, and you do get that sense that he's done it to be deliberately difficult, to make the book intentionally hard to get into. So, glasses on, I'm going to give you an insight into the experience of reading, or trying to read, Infinite Jest. I'm on page 88, and halfway down the page there's an expression that's randomly in French. Now, I don't speak French, but there's an end note. It's an end note, it's not a footnote, so we have to page forward, find the right spot, end note 37, and we learn that that French expression means wheelchair. Back to the story, a couple of sentences later, a reference to, I quote, Goethe's well-known Brückengespenst phenomenon. Back to the end notes, that is an optical illusion that affects certain mountains that David Foster Wallace knows all about, and he wants us to know all about as well. Then back to the story, we get a whole page, and then we're introduced to a new character, Monsieur Fortier, Endnote 39. Endnote 39 itself has a footnote B. Footnote B tells us to read Endnote 304, and Endnote 304 is 7 pages long. Now, in a different context, I think I would really enjoy this. If this was Infinite Jest, the computer game, which in 1996 it absolutely could have been, I think I would have fun exploring the plot, exploring the world, choosing which rabbit holes to go down. And I would have fun because I would have agency. But it's not a computer game, it's a novel, and I have no agency. I am strapped to a gurney, being wheeled wherever David Foster Wallace chooses to take me. And sometimes he takes me to places that develop the characters or move on the plot, and sometimes he just wants to shout in my ear about different types of amphetamines. And you just have to trust that after 1,000 pages, it's all going to come together. I don't have that trust. And it's made me realise how important it is for me, and this is about me, it's not about the book, it's about me, but how important it is for me to understand the author's intent. So at the start of the book, there is a mystery. Within the first dozen pages or so, something very odd and surprising happens. And then it's not referred to again. And if this was a Golden Age detective thriller, or if it was a crime novel of any kind, I would understand that that was intentional and the author was going to come back to it and there would be a satisfying resolution. I do not have confidence that there will be a satisfying resolution. And in fact, because of one of the plot devices, I have this terrifying thought that I'm going to get to the end and discover that I'm being sent right back to the start to read the whole thing all over again. But there's one thing I haven't mentioned yet, which is that Infinite Jest is properly funny. Not side-splitting, roll on the floor funny, but that much deeper kind of satire, which comes from choosing exactly the right word at exactly the right moment to make your story ridiculous, but simultaneously recognisable and eerily credible. There have been many times in the past month when I have decided to stop reading Infinite Jest, and David Foster Wallace has reliably chosen exactly that moment to drop in some pure gold. Is that the jest? Is it that this book, which is all about addiction and about being drawn back to something that you do not want to do, itself uses the same techniques as the YouTube algorithm to keep you scrolling through the dross because occasionally you get a precious reward? Maybe so, but I'm not addicted. I can stop anytime I want to, and I want to stop now. DNF. Sorry.
Well, thank you for that, Richard. Very erudite, eloquent, intellectual, clever, funny review of your experience of reading Infinite Jest. I don't think we should have guest reviewers on the channel anymore, Stanley, because it's just going to show up how shoddy and unprepared we are, really. So there you go. But no, that was great. Thank you, Richard. Sorry that you didn't have a great experience with the book, but you only have yourself to blame, is all I will say. So yes, that concludes the first Les Mis section of this video. May come back to it later, depending on how far I get. I have also read Miss Percy's Travel Guide to Welsh Moors and Feral Dragons by Quenby Olson. Listened to the audiobook of that. I was very much looking forward to it because I had enjoyed the first in the series a lot. And yeah, it was fun. This one picks up almost exactly where the first one ended, with the journey to Wales. And I really enjoy these characters in this world. It was fun to get back to it. It felt very much like a slightly lesser middle installment of a trilogy, unfortunately. Not a huge amount actually happened in this book, if I'm honest, and it did feel as if it was a bit dragged out. But overall, I enjoyed it. It was fun. It's fulfilling part of the Become the Avatar prompt from Herkyed, where you have to find books either with earth, air, wind, either with earth, air, fire and water in the titles or represented on the covers. And you can choose to do either, and I'm doing both because why not? And this very much has fire on the cover. And again, I can't remember what the second prompt is, but I will stick it up there when I've looked it up. Yeah, I would give it 3.5 stars, I think. It definitely ended in a really interesting way. I thought the reintroduction of the bad guys was a bit weak, unfortunately, but then the climax was really exciting and it's leading into the third installment in a very compelling way. So I am looking forward to finishing off the series fairly soon. 3.5 stars for Miss Percy and the continuation of the Dragons. Next, I have the Roanoke Girls by Amy Engel, which I think is fulfilling the published in 2017 Herkid prompt. And yeah, can't keep track. So the other ones up here, sorry about not being able to remember them. This is about a young woman called Lane who is called back to her family home where her grandparents are, and by a crisis, her cousin has gone missing, and they call her back to the family home to help them out and support them in that. That is not what this book is about. And since the main secret of the family is revealed very early on in the book, it surprised me. I don't have any qualms about it being a spoiler to say this book is about incest in a very dark, very grand scale, very messed up way. Yeah, you have been warned, basically. So if that's not something that you can get on board with, well, I mean, yeah, that's very bad phrasing. That's not what I meant. If that's not something you're comfortable reading about, let's say, it is not presented as a good thing. Trust me, that's fine. Yeah, this is not the book for you. I did think about DNFing it fairly early on, but I'm glad I didn't, actually, because it is very well written and it is very well put together, and the way that everything gets resolved, particularly in the last few pages even, is very satisfying. And I thought that the ending was very good. There's no easy answers here, there's no quick fixes, but there is hope. And this book, yeah, this is a dark book, and it's very unpleasant, and but very well done. Is, yeah, I think pretty much all I've got to say about it. I'm going to give it 4 stars because it was very well written, but do be careful because I would say that, yeah, the one aspect of it was very weird. The way it's structured and with the flashbacks and stuff, it's written as if you don't know the secret at the heart of the family, and as if it's being obscured throughout the book, and yet it's actually blatantly revealed and stated outright in the first few pages even. So that was a bit weird. But that aside, I think it was very well put together, very well written, interesting, complex characters, and a really good conclusion. I'm giving it 4 stars. And the other audio book that I have listened to this month is Finders Keepers by Stephen King. I was surprised. I did Mr. Mercedes, the first in the Bill Hodges trilogy by Stephen King, for my Reviews Revisited episode last month. And I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it. And I was very keen to carry on. So I did. Yeah, this one didn't really do it for me, unfortunately. I was very excited about it. It's about a writer whose unpublished novels are stolen in 1978 and buried under a tree. And then a boy called Peter finds them and has to decide what to do. His family is struggling for money, and he is a massive fan of the writer, so the writer's previous work, so he knows what he's got, but he doesn't know what to do with it. And I was intrigued by the premise. I like stuff about writers, but it didn't really work for me in a lot of ways. I thought it was very clever the way that it was connected to the case from the first book. I wasn't expecting that, and I thought that was very well done. And the character's really good, as in the previous book. It did keep me engaged throughout, but I was there to spend more time with the characters from the previous book, Hodges, Holly, and Jerome, who formed the investigating team. And they didn't really come into it. They were barely in it in the first half, and they didn't really come into it properly until right near the end. And that's when it really picked up, and the ending was fantastic. But the rest of it felt very, very dragged out. There was a lot of lengthy flashbacks revealing information that we'd already had, so they weren't fantastically interesting. The bad guy, I thought, was pretty much a repeat of the bad guy from the first book. Young, angry man with a bad relationship with his terrible mother, a massive superiority complex, wildly offensive attitudes to pretty much everyone around him that come out in his narrative section. So that felt a bit repetitive from the first book. But the end, wow, I was shouting at my phone a lot during the ending, and actually ended up siding with the bad guy for a little while, which was a bit unsettling. And yeah, Hodges and Holly and Jerome did come into their own, and once they were properly in it, it really picked up. So I'm hoping that that will be more the case in the third book, because I'm going to carry on and finish the series, because Will Patton, I think, is one of the best audiobook narrators I've ever come across, and I really enjoy the way he tells the story. So that was great. And yes, I definitely enjoyed the ending. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about the introduction of the supernatural aspects. I was enjoying the fact that this Stephen King series didn't seem to have supernatural aspects. So I'm going to have to wait and see what happens with that, because I'm not a horror fan. So that may well impact on how much I enjoy the third one, and whether I then carry on with the Holly Gibney series that continues on from this. But yes, I overall enjoyed it, and I will be listening to the third one before too long. 3.5 stars for that one. And that's where I'm up to at the moment in the month. I've got a few days left to finish Les Mis and read the book club choice for my family book club for this month. And I will come back in a bit for an update to round out my reading for July. So I'm back after another few days, and I have another book to talk about. Rashomon and Other Stories by Ryunosuke Akutagawa. Sorry, totally mangled that one. This was my brother's pick for our family book club at the start of August, and I have to admit, I struggled quite a lot with this book. A lot of the stories I didn't really understand what they were trying to do. Quite a few of them are pretty grim, very unpleasant in places. And the writing, I have to say, the writing and presumably also the translation, very good. A lot of vivid description, but that made the unpleasant bits even more horrible. But there were also some lovely descriptions of landscapes and gardens and plants and birds, and a lot of very clever and effective portraits of different people and different characters. But I just didn't really connect with what the writer was trying to do, and the stories just kind of passed me by. I am glad that I persevered to the point where David said he wanted us to get to, because the last two stories I read, Green Onions and Horse Legs, I did actually really enjoy. They were very funny. There was a lot of meta commentary from the author about the story, and it was a lot clearer to me what the point was and where it was going and the effect that was being achieved. One of them was about a young woman who gets blinded by love of a young man, but is saved from losing her virtue by spotting some onions on sale and getting distracted and going into the greengrocer rather than disappearing off with him to his house. So that was quite funny. And the last one, Horse Legs, was about a man who died, and then it turned out that it wasn't him who was supposed to have died, and the death's agents had got the wrong guy. But a few days had passed before they realised, and his body had started to rot, and they couldn't get legs from a different human corpse, so they gave him horse's legs. And then when he came back to life, he had to try and hide the fact that he had the horse's legs, and that was pretty funny as well. So glad I persevered, but 2 out of 12 stories isn't such a great ratio, so I'm going to give this one 2.5 stars. And fanfare, whoop, 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 I finished Les Misérables by Victor Hugo. I did it in the month, in July. I finished Les Misérables, and I really enjoyed this. It was great. I've already mostly discussed my theories and thoughts and feelings about this. earlier in the video, but yeah, really pleased that I picked this up from the Free Station Book Exchange. Really pleased that my little robot TBR prompt jar forced me to put it on the list for July. So it's another victory for me starting this YouTube channel, because I never would have read this book. It would have just sat on the shelf. Even if I'd picked it up from the Free Station Book Exchange, it would have sat on the shelf and I probably never would have got round to reading it. So yes, brilliant. Another book I never would have read if I hadn't started doing YouTube videos about my reading. Les Misérables. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Are you proud of me, Stanley? I read it. I did it. Yay. Whoa. So there you go. That's my July books. Quite a range. Some successes. That was inevitable. Some successes, some not so successful. But there we go. Very happy with my reading this month. Hope you are having a good reading month too. Bye for now.